Our first presenter is Mr. Canaan McGee. He is our Honors College Student President. Speaking of saving the world, he's our Honors College Student President. He has also been nominated to such distinctions as the Great Plains Honors Conference most recently, and he will be attending the National Collegiate Honors Conference in Chicago in the fall as the system representative for the Porch Scholar Award nomination. The title of his presentation is Laws of War, Humanity, Warfare, and Technology. Mr. Canaan McGee.
So first, I'd like to start off with the cheese pizzas in New York. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Canaan McGee, and today I'm going to be sharing my research with you on the development of lethal autonomous weapon systems and the correlation between warfare, humanity, and technology. Lethal autonomous weapon systems will be defined as weapon systems that, once activated, can select and engage targets without further human intervention. Note that defensive autonomous weapon systems are already being utilized today. However, for the purposes of this presentation, we will be focusing on offensive autonomous weapon systems. In the 21st century, we live in a time of tremendous technological advancements. In fact, researchers specializing in the advancements of artificial intelligence suspect that in the 21st century, we will experience 20,000 years of progress. That is 20,000 years compressed within the time frame of 100 years. That is unprecedented in the history of mankind. As a result, many scholars and researchers have created theories to predict the future implications of lethal autonomous weapon systems as it relates to humanity and warfare. Among them being Ray Kurzweil, author of The Law of Accelerating Intelligence. In his essays on accelerating intelligence, Kurzweil describes what is known as the singularity, or the point at which technological change is so rapid and so profound that it represents a rupture in the fabric of human history. Exposure to this information, in addition to discovering the future implications of lethal autonomous weapon systems in warfare, led me to question, why do humans engage in armed conflict? Why do we put our lives on the line and kill other human beings? What humanitarian concerns arise from the use of these weapon systems, and will the creation and utilization of lethal autonomous weapon systems lower the threshold for engaging in war? Will nations that have this technology be more willing to fight rather than solve issues diplomatically? Now, before we can fully understand and appreciate the future implications of technology as it relates to humanity, it's important that we understand and appreciate the evolutionary process of life on Earth. Now, according to scientists and archaeologists, it took billions of years for primitive cells to develop on our Earth, billions of years for single-celled organisms to evolve, yet only millions, hundreds of millions of years for early humanoids to develop, and hundreds of thousands of years for ancient Homo sapiens to develop. Note the exponential rate at which our species has evolved. Likewise, we can see this in the technological advancements of our time. We see this same exponential growth with our technological advancements. Now, at one point in time, our ancient ancestors were nomadic people, traveling within the motherland of our species, Africa, in pursuit of resources to survive. However, around 100,000 years before a common era, a drastic shift in the climate change will force our ancestors to disperse within and outside of Africa. Around 10,000 BCE, research suggests that early Homo sapiens will begin to understand how to tame plants and animals, cultivate land, and settle down. For the first time in human history, we will acquire an abundance of resources. Around 3,500 BCE, cities will begin being constructed in a region known as Mesopotamia, or the land between the two rivers. Note that Mesopotamia is now modern-day Iraq. One of the first and most well-known civilizations to mankind will be the civilization of Sumer. A brief definition of civilization: they will begin understanding how to maintain agricultural systems, use irrigational systems, and be able to provide infrastructure which serves permanent settlements. Now, during this time period, Kurzweil describes what is known as hybrid evolution. He suggests that the ancient Sumerians will now begin transcending the biological process by utilizing technology as an extension of our being. So the technology is not a separate entity, it is actually an extension of what it means to be human. The ancient Homo sapiens will be, the ancient Sumerians will be credited with some of the most tremendous technological advancements in the history of mankind. We see this with the writing, the wheel, the use of bronze and iron. However, as a result of these expanding populations of these cities, borders will be established, and we will see a collision of ideologies as a result, thus fostering the ingredients for war, for armed conflict. Now, although this is not the first conflict of mankind, the first for which there is any detailed evidence occurred between two cities in the region of Sumer, the city of Lachish and Ummah around 2525 BCE. So, why would these people be engaging in armed conflict again? Why would these individuals be willing to put their lives on the line? Well, according to the people of Lachish and Ummah, they will be fighting for agricultural rights in the region of Wendena. So when sustaining and developing a civilization, it's important that you have these agricultural resources to provide for your citizens. It is a necessity. So surely the Lachish and Ummah people felt justified in engaging in armed conflict. After all, they are fighting for their survival. So why is it then that in the 21st century, human beings continue to kill one another, even though we have an abundance of resources? In the United States of America, we have plenty of resources to provide for each and every citizen. Well, if we look at Charles Darwin, the evolutionary biologist's theory of natural selection, Darwin describes natural selection as the process by which individuals bearing characteristics which increase survival provides more opportunities to spread their genes throughout the population. The offspring of these individuals who have these adaptive characteristics will begin to spread and inherit these same characteristics. Now, if we fast forward to 1988 and understand John Tooby and Leda Cosmides, authors of The Evolution of Warfare and Cognitive Foundations, Tooby and Cosmides suggest that humans have developed specialized Darwinian algorithms or cognitive programs which govern coalitional behavior. At one point in time, our ancestors realized that if we work together, we can accomplish far more than by working by ourselves. Tooby and Cosmides further suggest that if a group of males assess the relevant variables associated with engaging in armed conflict and determine that they are larger or more formidable, there will be a manifestation of eagerness and satisfaction for engaging in armed conflict, even a manifestation of obliviousness or insensitivity associated with the risk of putting their lives on the line. Simply put, if a group of males decides that we can work together and take this group's females and resources, we can ultimately survive and reproduce. So understanding this rationale, this explains why we still experience strong pro-war emotions in the 21st century. If the survivors of these successful wars are passing their genes throughout our population, this makes sense. However, Tooby and Cosmides suggest that because of the rapid evolution of our species, we are still operating on primitive cognitive programs in the 21st century, which can be troublesome. So now that we've gained an understanding, a foundation for the evolutionary process on our Earth, as well as the cognitive programs associated with engaging in armed conflict, we can begin to understand and appreciate the discussion of lethal autonomous weapon systems in today's time. Created in 1945 for the purpose of maintaining international peace and security, members of the United Nations have already begun discussing prohibiting these weapon systems. Last year, on May 13th, 2014, the first experts meeting was held to discuss the prohibitions of these weapon systems. Countries from around the globe came together, met at the United Nations to provide country statements and address their concerns. Note that countries such as Egypt, Ecuador, and Pakistan have urged complete prohibition of these weapon systems, while others have suggested temporary moratorium or a temporary prohibition to provide time to develop and understand the artificial intelligence associated with these weapon systems. Countries such as China, Russia, Israel, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America have already begun funding and developing these weapon systems. Note that the latest experts meeting took place this year, last month, on April 13th through the 17th. However, the report is not scheduled to be published until November this year. Currently, there are no legally binding actions regarding the use of these weapon systems. However, the sheer fact that members of the United Nations, the largest international organization in the history of mankind, as well as external parties of the international community, the sheer fact that they're engaging in discussion on the use of these weapon systems highlights the seriousness of the artificial intelligence associated with these systems. Now, there are those that believe lethal autonomous weapon systems would be beneficial for mankind, and those that disagree. Advocates for these weapon systems suggest that they would actually be more humane than human soldiers, primarily due to the fact that they lack emotional connection. There would be no fear for their safety, no fear for their lives. They would never act out of anger or spite. It is strictly business. The primary argument of the advocates is that these weapon systems would save human lives. We no longer have to send our fathers, our sons, our daughters, our mothers into armed conflict. We now have robots to do this for us. However, critics are concerned that this artificial intelligence associated with these weapon systems lacks human knowledge and judgments associated with the rules and norms of our society. This creates a fundamental challenge for the protection of civilians. How will these weapon systems be able to differentiate between your grandmother or a child and an enemy combatant? These questions remain to be unanswered. Further, the lack of legal accountability associated with these systems. If an autonomous weapon system were to malfunction, who will be held responsible? Will it be the military personnel, the manufacturers, the programmers? These questions remain to be unanswered. So why is this important? Why does any of this matter? Why are you here? Why is this significant? I hypothesize, as I'm sure many of you already have, the development and utilization of these systems is inevitable. As we clearly saw, many countries have already begun funding and developing these systems. This will create a technological disparity which has never been seen in mankind. We will have countries that have the ability to send robots into battle and underdeveloped countries that have absolutely no chance. I prophesize a world in which diplomatic relations between developed and underdeveloped countries no longer exist. You now have military might to impose on these individual countries. Further, the use of these systems will lead to dehumanized armed conflict. There will be a complete detachment from the act of killing. You see through the history of warfare, the idea is to create distance from our enemies. We see this with the innovation of the longbow, the cannon, rifles, drones. However, this is no longer distancing ourselves. This is complete detachment. This will distort the nature of warfare. We're hitting at the core of the human experience. We will be circumventing the awareness of death associated with warfare. So in conclusion, I have no idea what the future has in store for our species. But current research suggests that Kurzweil might in fact be true in his statement of addressing this singularity, this distortion of human history. It appears that the utilization and development of these weapon systems might serve as another tremendous leap towards this singularity. Thank you.
There we go. For those of you who are unaware how these sessions work, after a presenter has completed his presentation, we have a short Q&A. We start with the judges. To make sure that we have enough time to complete the session, I cannot guarantee we'll open it up to the broad room for long. But first off, do we have any questions from our judges?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like you said that laws will eliminate diplomatic relations between developed and underdeveloped nations. Is that your argument, or would you say that that's a possible outcome?
Possible outcome. Thank you for your question, by the way. Diplomatic relationships, I feel, will always be around, not necessarily for the military might, but there are other things that countries need from underdeveloped countries, such as the resources within these countries. So, not necessarily complete elimination of diplomatic relationships, but I guess the diplomacy aspect, the aspect of these countries having equality in their voices and being able to engage with one another, I believe that will become extremely difficult when talking with a nation that you know has this weapon system to impose on your people if you're not willing to negotiate with their countries. But yes, most definitely.
Okay, so maybe you would say then that it will make diplomatic relations between these nations less meaningful. In other words, there's already disparity of military power that a lot of people would say weakens or undermines the meaningfulness of diplomacy between such nations, and this will just exacerbate that problem?
Definitely.
Looks like that's the last question from our noble, esteemed judges. Anyone in the audience like to has a question for? Please introduce who you are, by the way, when you ask your question.
My name is Charles Thomas. Do you think man is becoming stronger and more intelligent as a whole, or do you think we're sharing our fear through our use of intelligence and technology in order to survive and thrive?
Would you restate that, please? I'm sorry.
Do you think man is becoming stronger and more intelligent as a whole, or do you think we are sharing our fear through our use of intelligence and technology in order to strive and survive?
Thank you for your question. Do I think man is becoming stronger with the use of technology? One thing that Kurzweil addresses in his essays on the singularity is there's only going to be certain individuals who will have access to this technology. So I don't think that mankind as a whole will be becoming more powerful, but the individuals that have access to this information that know the future implications, I think there will be an extreme gain of power in that aspect. The fear, I don't necessarily understand your question with the fear of utilizing these systems.
It's just as far as like, when you went over how man has evolved, and you started through the whole situation where it's kind of like a parasite. You consume, and then when everything's gone, you move on. So, as far as with that type of analogy, kind of looking at the whole conflict situation where, as far as fear, I think it's more of a situation where instead of being able to sit down and say, okay, well, something's wrong, we have to fix it, it's more of just doing what we've done over the abuse. It's overcome that.
Most definitely. I think that definitely does apply in a sense to the development of these technologies. What I found really interesting is it appears like the paradigm of our society is that technology is separate from the human experience. Like they have no relationship with our experience. But I found it interesting, this hybrid evolution, where Kurzweil describes it not as a separate entity, but actually an extension of our being. So technology may be a manifestation of our fear. We want to eliminate this fear within ourselves of killing other human beings, so we can create these weapon systems to do that for us. So most definitely.
Thank you. Any remaining questions? We might have time for one brief question.
Hi, I'm Demetha Guillory, and I teach U.S. history here. And my question is in relationship between this new advancement in warfare and the role of the United Nations. Do you have a vision of how the United Nations could possibly address the arrival of such formidable systems of warfare?
Definitely, thank you for your question. As Professor Kaiser mentioned, the National Model United Nations, I was a part of the General Assembly First Committee, and so that was one of the topics we had to address was creating resolutions to prohibit these weapon systems. And it's really interesting, you see students simulating countries. So as the Republic of Sudan, we're urging for complete prohibition of these weapon systems, where you see the representatives of China or the US suggesting a moratorium, or maybe we should just slow it down and fully develop this artificial intelligence. It may be able to benefit us in other aspects of our society. One of my concerns, however, with the United Nations is that although it is an amazing platform for member states to come and create these resolutions, you can't stop a country from developing these weapon systems. You can create this resolution and pass this idea. However, as we've seen in the past, there's been many resolutions that have been created but been broken by the same countries that are signing and passing these resolutions. So I know it's kind of cynical, but I don't have much faith in the role of the United Nations as far as addressing these weapon systems. I think it's going to be inevitable. I think at this point it's going to be more how are we going to cope with these weapon systems in our society.
Thank you very much for those questions, and thank you very much, Mr. McGee.